At 8:12 on Monday morning, Derek Vaughn fired me in front of 40 employees for being 12 minutes late. I was still holding the silver pen I had just used to sign a $308 billion contract. At 8:19, security took my badge. At 8:27, Derek walked into the boardroom to announce the deal as his own. What he did not know was that Aurora had placed one condition deep inside the contract: the project could not move forward without me. That morning had begun at 4:18 when Eleanor Hayes called and said Aurora's attorneys had found a problem in the supplier guarantee. If we could not fix it before market opening, 14 months of negotiations would collapse. I emailed Derek and Sabrina at 4:52. Emergency signing session moved to Hartwell and Pierce. I'll arrive at Halcyon after execution. Then I drove through a foggy San Francisco morning while eating half a granola bar that tasted like compressed furniture. By 5:30, I was in a conference room near Salesforce Tower with 12 lawyers, 3 financial advisors, and 1 printer that chose the most expensive moment in corporate history to forget how paper worked. At 7:48, both sides signed. Eleanor handed me the silver pen. "You earned this," she said. I should have taken a photograph. Instead, I put the pen in my jacket pocket and ran to the office. Derek was waiting beside the employee entrance. "You're late," he said. I was closing Aurora. This company has standards. So does Aurora. That's why the contract took 14 months. Sabrina appeared with a termination folder already in her hands. That should have warned me. Derek announced that my tardiness demonstrated open disregard for the new culture. I tried to explain that the contract had been signed 12 minutes earlier than our deadline, but he raised a hand. "The decision is final." HR collected my laptop. Security escorted me past employees who suddenly found the lobby floor deeply fascinating. I kept thinking about the email I had sent. Maybe it failed. Maybe Derek had not seen it. Maybe I should have called. Self-blame is remarkably efficient. It begins working before facts arrive. Outside, I sat on a concrete planter and opened my phone. The email showed as delivered to both Derek and Sabrina. Then Eleanor called. "Natalie," she said, "Derek is presenting the deal to your board without you." "I no longer work there." There was a silence sharp enough to cut glass. "He fired you? For being 12 minutes late." Eleanor inhaled slowly. "Then he has not read Section 22. Section 22 was buried on page 317. I knew that because I had spent 3 weeks arguing over every comma in it. At the time, it had seemed less like a contract clause and more like a hostage negotiation conducted by people with law degrees. The section named me as Halcyon's required executive lead for the first 24 months of implementation. Replacing me without Aurora's written consent allowed Aurora to suspend funding, delay deployment, and recover its initial payment. The payment was $186 million. Derek discovered this at 8:34. I know the exact time because Marcus Lee texted me from inside the boardroom. "You should probably sit down." I was already sitting on the planter, so for once I was ahead of schedule. Inside Halcyon, Derek had reached slide 7 of his presentation. The title reportedly read, "Leadership That Delivers." He had been CEO for 6 weeks. I had spent 14 months delivering the thing. Corporate mathematics can be creative when bonuses are involved. According to Marcus, Eleanor's legal counsel interrupted the presentation through video conference. "Before we proceed," the lawyer said, "please confirm Natalie Brooks remains executive lead." Derek replied that I had been transitioned out for performance reasons. That phrase traveled quickly through the room and died on contact with the contract. Aurora suspended the initial transfer before lunch. By 1, Halcyon's general counsel had called me 6 times. I did not answer until I had spoken with an employment attorney named June Patel. June had the calm voice of someone who had watched many executives discover that confidence was not a legal defense. "Do not discuss proprietary information," she said. "Do not contact employees. Save everything you legally possess. I have a pen. Save the pen." At 2:40, Sabrina called. "We need you to return tomorrow for a transition meeting." Am I being reinstated? No. Then what am I transitioning into? Silence. "We expect professionalism. You fired me in the lobby. That doesn't excuse hostility." Apparently, unemployment came with performance expectations. That evening, Halcyon issued a company-wide memo stating I had been dismissed after repeated attendance concerns. I had never received a written warning in 9 years. Marcus sent another message. They removed your name from the investor deck. Derek is claiming he initiated Aurora after becoming CEO. Then a courier delivered a proposed consulting agreement. Halcyon wanted me back for 30 days, under Sabrina's supervision, at half my previous salary. The agreement also required me to acknowledge that Derek had led the negotiation. I read it twice. Then I noticed the creation date embedded in the footer. The document had been drafted on Sunday night, before I had ever been late. June examined the agreement in her office while I twisted the silver pen between my fingers. This isn't a consulting contract, she said. It has the word consultant 11 times. It also asks you to waive your claims, accept reduced pay, and confirm a false history of the deal. So it's a consulting contract with emotional blackmail. Those usually cost extra. June sent Halcyon a 4-sentence rejection. Derek responded personally within 9 minutes. His email warned that refusing to assist could damage my reputation throughout the energy industry. It was an impressive threat from a man whose largest energy experience involved adjusting the thermostat in a conference room. Eleanor called me later that afternoon. Aurora had no interest in forcing Halcyon to rehire me. They no longer trusted Derek to manage the arrangement. Instead, Aurora proposed appointing me as its independent implementation representative. I would report directly to Aurora's investment committee while coordinating with Halcyon's technical teams. Halcyon could not dismiss me. Sabrina could not supervise me. Derek could not alter my findings. The rate was more than double my former compensation. I hesitated, not because I wanted to protect Derek. I wanted to see him explain Section 22 to the board using finger puppets. But thousands of employees depended on the contract. Many had mortgages, children, and no involvement in executive vanity. I accepted. My first meeting back at Halcyon took place 3 days after security removed me. The guard at reception looked uncomfortable. Do you need a temporary badge? Apparently, permanent badges are reserved for people who haven't closed $3 billion deals. He laughed, then quickly checked whether anyone important had heard him. Derek entered the conference room late. 14 minutes late. Nobody fired him. He said his delay was due to an external stakeholder conversation, which I believe is executive language for traffic. Sabrina sat beside him with a new title beneath her name, Interim Head of Strategic Partnerships, my old title. She opened the meeting by saying we all needed to move beyond personal feelings. I agreed. Then I requested the complete negotiation record, staffing history, and investor communications related to Aurora. Her smile tightened. That level of access may not be appropriate. Eleanor's counsel slid Section 22 across the table. It is required. Derek looked at me. You're enjoying this? No, I said. Enjoyment would require snacks. The files arrived that evening. Most were ordinary. One was not. The internal termination log showed my dismissal had been approved at 9:41 Sunday night. Attached to it was a draft press release crediting Derek with the Aurora deal. The press release called Derek the architect of Halcyon's historic Aurora partnership. Derek had attended 2 negotiation meetings. At the first, he confused battery capacity with annual revenue. At the second, Eleanor asked him to stop answering technical questions. Architecture was apparently a flexible profession. I forwarded the documents to June because I had received them through my authorized role. I did not download anything outside the project scope. Search private accounts or ask Marcus to steal records. That distinction became important. Marcus requested a meeting at a crowded coffee shop near Embarcadero. He arrived wearing a baseball cap that made him look less like a secret source and more like someone avoiding sunlight. They're changing the financial models, he said. How? They moved the projected Aurora revenue into Derek's performance period. His bonus triples if the first payment is recognized this quarter. Can they recognize it while Aurora has suspended funding? No, but the investor deck says funding is unconditional. I stirred a coffee I had forgotten to drink. Use the internal ethics process. Marcus gave me a tired look. The ethics office reports to Sabrina. Of course it did. Nothing demonstrates independence like reporting misconduct to the person coordinating it. I told him to document concerns through the audit committee's external portal, which bypassed management. He hesitated. His mother was undergoing cancer treatment. His salary covered expenses, insurance did not. Losing his job was not an abstract moral exercise. I can't tell you what to risk, I said. Just don't let them make you responsible for numbers you didn't approve. The next morning, Sabrina placed Marcus on a performance plan for communication deficiencies. He had received an excellent review 6 weeks earlier. Meanwhile, Derek invited me to lunch at the Palace Hotel. He spent 20 minutes describing the importance of unity, then offered me $1.5 million to sign a confidential settlement. I would receive the money after publicly acknowledging that Derek had originated the Aurora strategy. You're asking me to sell you 14 months of my work. I'm offering you a graceful exit. You already gave me an exit. Security supervised it. His jaw tightened. This is larger than your pride. Yes, it's approximately $3.8 billion larger. That afternoon, Halcyon sent its revised investor presentation to the board. My name had disappeared from every slide, timeline, and negotiation record. But Marcus discovered something worse. The metadata showed Sabrina had deleted my 4:52 a.m. email from Derek's executive briefing folder before I arrived at the office. She had not merely ignored my message. She had made sure Derek could pretend it never existed. Halcyon scheduled an investor call for Friday. Aurora's first payment remained frozen, but Derek planned to announce the full contract as secured revenue. He argued that the suspension was administrative. A missing $186 million is administrative in the same way a missing engine is a minor concern during takeoff. Eleanor sent Halcyon a written warning. Aurora had not authorized public statements suggesting implementation had begun. The warning went to Derek, Sabrina and Halcyon's general counsel. During the call, Derek said the exact opposite. He told analysts the project was moving forward without material conditions. He described himself as having personally led the final negotiations and said the initial funding process was complete. Halcyon's stock rose 11%. I listened from June's office while she wrote down every sentence. Is he always this confident? She asked. He once explained grid resilience to a utility engineer using a restaurant menu. Did it help? The engineer ordered lunch. After the call, Aurora issued a private demand for correction. Derek refused, claiming a clarification would create unnecessary market concern. Then Sabrina asked to meet me alone. She arrived at June's office carrying a revised settlement worth $2 million. Her hands trembled slightly when she placed it on the table. This is your last opportunity to resolve things privately. The new agreement required me to state that I had misunderstood company attendance expectations and voluntarily transferred negotiation authority to Derek before signing. It also included a non-disparagement clause broad enough to prevent me from correcting false statements made about me. Did Derek write this? I asked. Legal prepared it. June looked at the formatting. Legal did not prepare this. Sabrina's face changed. She stood too quickly, knocking her water against the table. I caught it before it spilled, then felt absurdly annoyed with myself for saving her paperwork. As she gathered the pages, her phone lit up. A message preview appeared from Derek. Did she sign? Dinner at our place after. Our place. Sabrina covered the screen, but not quickly enough. I had suspected favoritism. I had not known they were involved. Their relationship mattered, because Sabrina had approved Derek's compensation changes, created my termination file, and recommended her friend for my position. That was not merely office gossip. It was an undisclosed conflict of interest tied to a multi-billion-dollar deal. That evening, Marcus used the audit committee portal. He submitted the altered financial model, the deleted email log, and his original review history. At 10:17, the audit committee acknowledged receipt. At 10:21, Sabrina disabled Marcus's access badge. At 10:24, he texted me 4 words. They're coming for me. Marcus was fired at 8:05 the next morning. Sabrina claimed he had improperly accessed confidential compensation data. Marcus had never opened a compensation file. He had reported financial models within his assigned responsibilities. Facts were becoming inconvenient at Halcyon, so management had begun replacing them with adjectives. June connected Marcus with a whistleblower attorney. Eleanor's counsel notified Halcyon that retaliating against project personnel could constitute another contractual breach. By Monday, the audit committee had opened an independent investigation. Derek's defense was simple. I was bitter, Marcus was incompetent, Aurora was using the controversy to renegotiate pricing. Sabrina was a trusted executive whose personal life was irrelevant. The last claim would have been stronger if she had not helped design his bonus package while sharing an apartment with him. The committee interviewed me in a law office overlooking the Bay Bridge. Derek attended with 2 attorneys and the expression of a man who believed volume could substitute for documentation. He said I had repeatedly violated attendance rules. I produced 9 years of performance reviews. None mentioned attendance. He said I had failed to notify leadership about the emergency signing. I produced the 452 email and delivery receipts. Sabrina said the email had been routed incorrectly. The forensic specialist displayed the deletion log from her account. She stopped speaking. For a moment, I felt triumphant. Then I saw Marcus sitting outside the conference room, staring at his shoes while taking a call from the hospital billing office. My victory had not paid his mother's medical expenses. I had to look away. Eleanor testified after lunch. She explained why Aurora had insisted on naming me in Section 22. 3 months earlier, Derek had privately asked Aurora to remove me from the negotiation and replace me with Sabrina's friend. Eleanor refused because the replacement had no energy sector experience. Derek had planned my removal long before the Monday morning incident. The committee chair asked whether Aurora would continue with Halcyon. Eleanor's answer was careful. Only if the company demonstrates that its reporting, leadership, and deployment controls can be trusted. After the meeting, Sabrina followed me into the hallway. I can prove Derek ordered everything, she whispered. Then tell the committee. I need protection. You participated. Her eyes filled, though I could not tell whether from guilt or fear. I have recordings, she said, and messages about the deal, the press release, and Marcus. Before I could answer, Derek stepped out of the conference room. Sabrina immediately walked away. Derek watched her leave. Then he looked at me. For the first time, he seemed afraid. Sabrina met with the audit committee the next morning. She brought 2 phones, a personal laptop, and a lawyer who looked as though smiling required prior authorization. Her evidence showed that Derek had ordered her to prepare my termination before the contract signing. The plan was to remove me, announce the Aurora deal under his leadership, and install her college friend as executive lead. In exchange, Sabrina would receive a promotion and a large retention bonus. The messages were not subtle. Once Natalie is gone, the story is mine. Delete her email from the briefing folder. We only need the market to believe funding is final. Apparently, criminal intent becomes easier when punctuation is optional. Sabrina also admitted their relationship had begun before she joined Halcyon. Derek had directed the recruiting process while concealing that they were living together. She described this as an emotional connection. The audit lawyer described it as a material conflict. Corporate language had finally found a useful purpose. Derek was suspended before lunch. Sabrina was placed on administrative leave and locked out of Halcyon's systems. Marcus's termination was rescinded, though he did not return immediately. He needed time to care for his mother and decide whether working at Halcyon still qualified as self-respect. I thought the worst was over. Then, Derek hired a crisis communications firm. An article appeared online claiming I had threatened to sabotage the Aurora project unless Halcyon paid me millions. Anonymous sources described me as controlling, vindictive, and difficult to manage. One source said I struggled with punctuality. I had been late once. Because I was signing their contract, I began receiving messages from strangers who had apparently completed a full investigation between breakfast and posting angry comments from accounts named after trucks. June told me not to respond. Eleanor told me not to respond. My younger sister told me to delete the internet. That evening, I sat in my apartment eating cereal from a coffee mug because every bowl was in the dishwasher. I wondered whether I should have taken Derek's settlement. Maybe I had overestimated my strength. Maybe the contract would collapse anyway. Maybe being right was simply a slower way to lose. Then Marcus called. My mother asked why I got fired, he said. What did you tell her? Then I reported the truth. And what did she say? She said, "Good. Now stop sounding ashamed." I laughed, then unexpectedly started crying. The following morning, Halcyon received subpoenas from federal securities regulators. Derek's investor call was no longer just an internal problem. The regulators focused on 3 questions. Did Derek know Aurora had suspended funding? Did he intentionally mislead investors? Did he alter records to secure his bonus? The answers appeared to be yes, yes, and an aggressively documented yes. But the contract still had to be saved. Aurora required a full technical review before releasing any money. That sent me, Marcus, and a team of engineers to a storage facility outside Reno, Nevada. The site held prototype battery units intended for deployment across 5 states. On our second day, an engineer named Priya noticed abnormal heat readings in one enclosure. The monitoring dashboard marked them as acceptable. They were not. A software threshold had been manually raised 2 weeks earlier, allowing dangerous temperature spikes to appear normal. The change had been approved by Derek's office to prevent another scheduled delay. We shut down the test yard. Halcyon's temporary operations chief argued that stopping the trial could cost millions. "A thermal event could cost more," I said. "How much more?" "Depends whether you include the building." Humor works poorly during possible battery fires, but fear occasionally needs somewhere to sit. For 6 hours, the engineering team inspected cooling systems and isolated 3 defective modules. One technician had been working beside them minutes before shutdown. When he realized what could have happened, he sat on the concrete and covered his face. I sat beside him. Neither of us spoke. That silence mattered more than every board presentation. The fault was fixable. The concealment was not. Marcus found that the raised threshold appeared in a schedule risk report Derek had ordered removed from the investor archive. Sabrina's recordings confirmed he knew the units had not completed safety validation when he announced implementation was underway. Aurora did not cancel. Instead, Eleanor approved a revised 6-month rollout with independent safety oversight and financial penalties charged against Halcyon's executive compensation pool. Employees would keep their jobs. The people who created the risk would carry the cost. Back in San Francisco, federal agents executed search warrants at Derek's home and private office. They seized financial records showing he had borrowed against the expected bonus before the Aurora announcement. He had already spent part of money he had not earned. Luxury has always been more efficient when someone else absorbs the consequences. That evening, June called. Derek tried to leave for Cabo. For vacation? With 2 laptops and $48,000 in cash, federal agents stopped him at the airport. The man who fired me for being 12 minutes late had missed his flight entirely. Derek was charged with securities fraud, wire fraud, obstruction, and making false statements to investigators. His attorneys insisted the airport incident had been misunderstood. Apparently, carrying 2 company laptops and $48,000 in cash toward an international departure was a spontaneous wellness decision. Sabrina accepted a cooperation agreement. She provided messages, recordings, and financial documents in exchange for reduced charges. That did not erase her role. Halcyon fired her, sued to recover compensation, and notified the professional association that had certified her in human resources. She lost the career she had tried to accelerate by removing mine. The board canceled Derek's bonus, revoked his stock awards, and filed a civil claim for damages. Marcus received back pay and reimbursement for his legal expenses. Halcyon also extended health coverage for his mother's treatment. When I told him, he stared at the letter for a long time. Then he said, "I still hate this company. That seems healthy." The interim board offered me Derek's former position, CEO of Halcyon Grid Systems. The salary was enormous. The equity package was larger. The contract included authority to rebuild leadership, compliance, and investor reporting. For 9 years, I had believed becoming CEO would prove I mattered. Now the offer felt like being invited to captain a ship after someone else had drilled holes in it and taken the lifeboat to Cabo. I asked for 48 hours. I walked past Halcyon's glass offices that evening. I remembered arriving before sunrise, missing birthdays, and eating dinner from vending machines because dedication was supposed to become visible eventually. The company had not failed to see my work. Certain people had seen it clearly enough to steal it. That distinction changed everything. I declined the CEO role. I agreed to complete Aurora's stabilization period as an independent advisor, but I would not return as an employee. Eleanor offered Aurora as the founding client of a negotiation and project risk firm I had quietly considered starting. Marcus joined as chief financial officer after his mother's treatment stabilized. Priya left Halcyon to lead technical oversight. We named the company Northline Strategic Projects. Our first office had 6 desks, 1 conference room, and a kitchen faucet that screamed whenever anyone used hot water. It was perfect. 3 months later, Derek pleaded guilty to 2 federal counts after prosecutors presented the emails, altered models, and airport evidence. The judge scheduled sentencing for spring. On the morning we signed our second major client, I used the same silver pen Eleanor had given me. This time, no one else got to write their name over mine. 8 months after Derek fired me, the first Aurora facility entered commercial operation. The total contract remained valued at $3.08 billion over 12 years. It was never a giant check sitting in a vault, despite several online commenters imagining I had carried $3 billion to work in my purse. The project passed every safety inspection. The delayed $186 million payment was released. Halcyon survived, smaller and under new leadership. Its board separated safety approval from revenue targets, rebuilt its ethics office, and prohibited human resources executives from approving compensation for people with whom they shared homes, vacations, or suspiciously romantic grocery lists. Progress sometimes requires very specific policies. Marcus became my business partner. His mother completed treatment and attended our company's first anniversary dinner. She hugged me, then warned me not to let Marcus work weekends. I told her I had been trying. She said, "Try harder." I understood where he got his negotiation skills. Sabrina received probation, community service, and a substantial financial penalty because of her cooperation. She remained barred from serving in senior corporate human resources roles for several years. Derek received 46 months in federal prison, restitution obligations, and a ban from holding an executive position at a public company. I attended the sentencing but did not speak. When the judge asked whether Derek wished to address the court, he blamed pressure, market expectations, and disloyal employees. Even facing prison, he still believed consequences were something other people created. I felt no triumph, only relief. The anger had kept me moving, but I did not want it choosing where I went next. A week later, Northline signed its 10th client. Our team planned a small celebration at 9 on Monday morning. I arrived at 9:07. I had stopped to buy pastries, then returned to the bakery because they had forgotten Marcus's cinnamon roll. On the elevator, one box tilted and icing landed on my sleeve. When I entered, everyone looked at the clock. I froze for half a second. Then Priya said, 7 minutes late, should we call security? Marcus added, only after we verify whether she closed another billion-dollar contract. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped the coffee. No one wrote me up. No one questioned my commitment. We started the meeting when everyone had something to eat. The silver pen sat on the table beside the contracts, scratched now from daily use. I had considered framing it, but that felt wrong. It was not a monument to the day Derek fired me. It was a tool. So was my anger. So was my experience. Even the humiliation had become useful once I stopped carrying it as proof that I had failed. Derek thought 12 minutes defined my value. He never understood that time was not what I owed a company. Judgment was. Integrity was. And neither of those could be stolen by changing the name on a slide. 2 years after Derek me, Northline had 41 employees and projects in 7 states. We had also developed a company policy that no one could be fired for being late unless they arrived on horseback, set the building on fire, or somehow did both before breakfast. Marcus wrote the policy. I approved it with minor edits. Halcyon eventually became one of our clients. Their new CEO came to my office personally and asked whether working together would feel awkward. Almost certainly, I said. He nodded. Can we still do it? That depends. Did you read the contract? He laughed, then admitted he had read it twice. That was a promising start. The Aurora project became one of the largest successful energy storage programs in the western United States. Most people never knew how close it had come to collapsing because one executive wanted a bonus and another wanted my office. That was fine with me. The best outcomes rarely come with dramatic music. Sometimes they look like stable systems, protected jobs, and meetings where nobody is afraid to tell the truth. I still kept the silver pen. It remained scratched, slightly dented, and completely ordinary. So did I, in some ways. I still overworked occasionally. I still blamed myself too quickly. I still arrived late now and then because life refused to respect calendar invitations. But I no longer confused loyalty with obedience. And whenever someone at Northline made an honest mistake, I remembered the morning Derek judged my entire career by 12 minutes. Then I looked at what those 12 minutes had eventually given me. Freedom.